The neon lights of Las Vegas never slept, and neither did Tom Reed. He walked through the employee entrance of the Golden Dice Casino, his dealer's uniform crisp despite the late hour. This was his third job this week, and his hands moved automatically as he counted chips and shuffled cards. The faces at his table blurred together. Tourists, high rollers, desperate gamblers chasing their losses. Everything changed when he heard the whispers about a new show in town. Not the usual Vegas entertainment, but something different. Something from the stars. Tom didn't believe in aliens, not really, but curiosity got the better of him. After his shift ended at 3 a.m., he followed the rumors to the edge of the city, where a massive black tent stood against the desert sky. The ticket cost him half his night's tips, but Tom handed over the money without thinking twice. The inside of the tent was darker than he expected, lit only by strange purple lights that seemed to float in midair. Glass cases lined the walls, each containing something impossible, creatures that couldn't exist on Earth. "Move along, folks. Keep moving," a guard said, pushing the crowd forward. Tom shuffled with the others, his eyes trying to take in everything at once. There were floating crystals that sang, plants that danced without wind, and tiny creatures that looked like they were made of living metal. Then he saw it. The cage was smaller than the others, tucked away in a corner like an afterthought. At first, Tom thought it was just another exotic bird display. The cage was clearly designed for parrots, with perches and metal bars spaced close together. But inside was no bird. A small figure sat hunched on one of the perches, no bigger than a child. Her skin gave off a soft blue glow that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. She looked almost human, except for the light that seemed to flow just under her skin. Her eyes, when she lifted them to meet Tom's gaze, were filled with stars. The sign beside the cage read, Specimen L7, Juvenile Female Lumini, species known for natural bioluminescence and light manipulation. Warning, do not approach. Light shows on schedule only. Tom couldn't move. The crowd pushed past him, but he stood frozen, staring at the cage. The alien girl, he couldn't think of her as a specimen, shifted slightly, and the light beneath her skin flickered. For a moment, it formed patterns that almost looked like words. Quite the specimen, isn't she? A smooth voice broke through Tom's thoughts. A tall man in an expensive black suit stood beside him, smiling like a shark. His name tag read Mr. Black, proprietor. One of the last of her kind. They're nearly extinct now. Such a shame. But she puts on quite a show. She's a child, Tom said, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Black's smile didn't waver. She's property, legally acquired through interstellar trading agreements. Would you like to see her perform? She can create the most magnificent light displays. For a price, of course. Tom watched as the alien girl's glow dimmed, like she was trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable. His hands clenched into fists. In 10 years of dealing cards, he'd seen every kind of cruel bet, every type of desperate gambler, every shade of greed. But this was different. How much? Tom asked, not looking at Mr. Black. Excuse me? How much for her freedom? Mr. Black laughed, a sound like ice cracking. She's not for sale. But, he paused, studying Tom with new interest. I do enjoy a good game. You work at the Golden Dice, don't you? I've seen you deal. Tom nodded slowly, his mind racing. He knew that look. He'd seen it 1,000 times across the poker table. The look of someone who thought they couldn't lose. Perhaps we could arrange something entertaining, Mr. Black said. A game of chance. Winner takes all. He pulled out a business card and held it out. Think it over, but don't take too long. We're not in town forever. Tom took the card, his eyes drawn back to the cage. The alien girl was watching him, her glow just a little brighter than before. As he walked away, following the crowd toward the exit, he could have sworn he saw patterns of lights spelling out a single word. Help. The neon lights of Vegas seemed dimmer as Tom walked home, the business card burning a hole in his pocket. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what he had to do. He just hoped he was good enough to pull it off. Tom spent 3 days watching the alien show. He learned the patterns, the security rotations, and most importantly, he watched Mr. Black. The man loved to gamble, but not like normal people. He would bet on anything. Which customer would leave first, how many minutes until the next raindrop, even what color shirt the next person through the door would wear. And he never lost. On the 4th night, Tom counted his savings in his small apartment. $2,000. Not nearly enough. He looked at the pictures on his wall. His old poker championship trophy, back when he played instead of dealt. His hand shook as he picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd sworn never to use. "Joey, it's Tom Reed. Remember that favor you owe me? I need money. A lot of it." Joey's voice was rough on the other end. "How much?" $50,000. There was a long pause. "You know my terms, Tom. 1 week to pay back double, or things get ugly." "I know." Tom hung up and looked out his window at the Vegas lights. In the distance, he could see the black tent rising against the sky like a dark mountain. The alien girl's dim glow haunted his dreams. Each night, her light grew fainter. The next evening, Tom walked into the show carrying a briefcase. He wore his best suit, the one he saved for high roller tables. Mr. Black stood by the alien girl's cage, watching her create small patterns of light for amazed tourists. "I want to make a bet," Tom said. Mr. Black turned, his shark smile appearing. "The dealer wants to play." "How interesting." He looked at the briefcase. "What stakes did you have in mind?" $50,000. 1 game of poker. If I win, the girl goes free. "And if you lose?" Mr. Black's eyes gleamed. "You get the money. And," Tom took a deep breath, "I work for you. 1 year, no pay." Mr. Black studied him for a long moment. The alien girl's light flickered rapidly, creating patterns that looked almost like warnings. A year of free labor from a professional dealer. That is tempting. But 50,000 seems low for such a rare specimen. "It's everything I have," Tom said. It was the truth. The money from Joey, his savings, even his car sale money. All of it. Mr. Black walked around him slowly. "You know what her kind can do. The light shows are nothing. They can bend light itself, create illusions so real you'd swear they were solid. Some say they can even read minds through light patterns reflected in your eyes." He stopped in front of Tom. "She's worth millions to the right buyer." "Then you have nothing to lose by playing," Tom said. "Unless you're afraid to bet against a casino dealer." The words hung in the air. Around them, the show continued, but Tom could feel the alien girl watching them. Her glow pulsed like a worried heartbeat. Mr. Black's smile widened. "Tomorrow night, after the show closes, 1 game, 5-card draw. Winner takes all." He held out his hand. Tom shook it, trying not to show how his heart raced. As Mr. Black walked away, Tom looked at the cage. The alien girl stood at the bars now, her glow brighter than he'd ever seen it. The lights under her skin formed complex patterns, faster than he could follow. "I'll get you out," he whispered. "I promise." He turned to leave, his mind already racing through strategies. He didn't see Mr. Black watching from the shadows, speaking quietly into a small device that glowed with the same strange purple light as the tent. "Everything is arranged," Mr. Black said into the device. The human took the bait. "Tomorrow night, we'll add another specimen to our collection." He smiled as he watched Tom's retreating back. After all, anyone who can read alien light patterns would be quite valuable to our show. In her cage, the alien girl's glow dimmed to almost nothing. Her light patterns spelled out a single word over and over: danger. Tom spent all day preparing for the game. He sold his TV, his computer, and even his mother's old ring. Each sale felt like ripping off a piece of his life, but he couldn't stop thinking about the alien girl's fading light. The pawn shops and quick cash stores knew him by name now, and each one took another bite of his future. Joey's money sat heavy in the briefcase under his bed. $50,000. Enough to buy a small house in some towns, but in Vegas it was just another bet on another table. Tom knew Joey's men would break more than his legs if he lost. The thought should have scared him more than it did. He practiced dealing cards for hours, his fingers moving automatically while his mind worked through every possible way the game could go. 5-card draw was simple on the surface. Get the best hand you can. Know when to hold and when to fold. But Tom had watched Mr. Black for days now. The man never lost because he never played fair. As the sun set, Tom walked to his regular diner. The waitress, Mary, brought his usual coffee without asking. She'd served him breakfast after his night shifts for 5 years. "You look terrible," she said, filling his cup. "Like you're about to do something stupid." Tom managed a small smile. "Maybe I am. Must be for something important." He thought about the alien girl's dim glow, about the patterns of light that looked like pleas for help. "Yeah, it is." Mary studied him for a moment, then reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small silver cross on a chain. "Here, my grandmother gave me this. Said it was lucky." She dropped it on the table. "You look like you need luck more than I do right now." Tom started to protest, but Mary had already walked away. He picked up the cross, feeling its weight in his hand. He wasn't religious, but maybe a little luck couldn't hurt. The black tent looked different at night, when all the crowds were gone. 2 large guards led Tom to a back room he hadn't seen before. It was set up like a high-roller poker room, with a single table in the center. The alien girl's cage sat in the corner, her faint glow casting strange shadows. Mr. Black sat at the table, shuffling a deck of cards with perfect precision. "Ah, Mr. Reed. Right on time." He gestured to the empty chair. "Shall we begin?" Tom set his briefcase on the table and opened it. The money inside looked small somehow, not nearly enough for what he was trying to do. Mr. Black's smile widened as he counted it. "The terms," Mr. Black said, dealing the first hand. 5-card draw. 1 game. If you win, the specimen goes free. If I win, I get the money and 1 year of your service." His eyes glittered. "Do you accept?" Tom looked at the alien girl. Her glow pulsed faster now, like a racing heartbeat. The patterns of light around her seemed to be trying to tell him something, but he couldn't understand them. "I accept." The cards felt different in his hands. Slicker, heavier than normal casino cards. Tom looked at his first hand. 2 kings, a 7, a 4, and a 2. Not terrible, but not great. He kept his face perfectly still, years of dealing poker coming in handy. Mr. Black's expression never changed as he looked at his own cards. Dealer's choice on the draw. "How many?" Tom studied his opponent carefully. Something wasn't right. The cards, the setup, the way Mr. Black kept glancing at the alien girl's cage. It all felt wrong, but he was in too deep to back out now. 3 cards, Tom said, discarding the 7, 4, and 2. As Mr. Black dealt him new cards, Tom caught a flash of purple light reflecting off their surface, the same purple light that filled the tent. In her cage, the alien girl's glow suddenly brightened. Her light patterns became frantic, spelling out words Tom could almost understand. He looked down at his new cards and felt his heart stop. The game was rigged, but not in the way he'd expected. The new cards in Tom's hand glowed faintly purple in the dim light. He'd seen enough trick cards in his years at the casino to know when something was wrong, but these were different. The purple glow matched the strange lights in the tent perfectly. These weren't just marked cards. They were alien technology. Tom glanced at the alien girl. Her light patterns had changed, becoming more urgent. He looked back at his cards, then at the reflection in Mr. Black's mirrored sunglasses. The purple glow showed up there too, forming tiny patterns that moved too fast to follow. That's when Tom understood. The alien girls people didn't just create light, they used it to communicate. And right now, these cards were talking to Mr. Black. Something wrong, Mr. Reed. Mr. Black's smile never wavered. You seem distracted. Tom forced himself to breathe slowly. He had 3 queens now, joining his 2 kings. A full house, a winning hand in any normal game. But this wasn't normal poker, and Mr. Black wasn't a normal opponent. Just thinking about my bet, Tom said. He touched Mary's silver cross in his pocket. Years of watching players had taught him that everyone had a tell, even aliens. He just had to find it. The alien girl's glow pulsed brighter for a moment, and Tom caught Mr. Black glancing at her cage. There it was, his tell. He wasn't reading the cards. He was reading her light patterns reflecting off them. Shall we show our hands? Mr. Black asked, his confidence clear in every word. Tom looked at his cards again. The purple glow seemed stronger now. If the alien girl could see his cards through their reflection, and Mr. Black could read her light patterns. Actually, Tom said, laying his cards face down, I'd like to raise the stakes. Mr. Black's eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, with what money? Not money. Information. Tom leaned forward. I know about the cards, about how you're using her to cheat. If I win, she goes free. If you win, you get the money, my service, and my silence. For the first time, Mr. Black's smile faltered. The alien girl's light flickered rapidly, creating patterns that danced across the walls. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Black said softly. The guards by the door stepped closer. It's not an accusation. It's a bet. Tom picked up his cards again, holding them at a different angle. But if you're worried, we could always call in the Gaming Commission. I'm sure they'd love to see these cards. The room grew very quiet. Even the alien girl's light seemed to dim, waiting. Mr. Black studied Tom for a long moment. Then he laughed. You're more interesting than I expected, Mr. Reed. Very well. New stakes accepted. He looked at his own cards. Show your hand. Tom placed his cards on the table. Full house. Queens over kings. Mr. Black's smile returned as he laid down his cards. 4 aces. He reached for the pile of money. The house always wins, Mr. Reed. But Tom was smiling too. Look again. The cards on the table had changed. Where Mr. Black's aces had been, there were now just number cards. The purple glow had faded completely. Impossible, Mr. Black whispered. He looked at the alien girl's cage. She stood at the bars now, her glow brighter than ever. The light patterns around her spelled out clear words. I choose him. You forgot something, Tom said quietly. She's not just a tool for your cheating. She's alive. And she gets to choose who to help. Mr. Black's face twisted with rage. He started to stand, but stopped as the alien girl's light suddenly filled the room, bright enough to blind. When everyone could see again, Tom's cards were exactly as he played them. Full house, queens over kings. The game is over, Tom said. I won fair and square. He touched Mary's cross again. Now let her go. Mr. Black's expression was deadly calm. Oh no, Mr. Reed. The game is far from over. He pressed a button under the table. Metal shutters slammed down over the windows and doors. In fact, we're about to start playing for much higher stakes. The metal shutters turned the back room into a prison. The guards moved closer, their hands reaching for weapons hidden under their jackets. Tom stood slowly, keeping his eyes on Mr. Black. The game is over, Tom repeated. I won. Won. Mr. Black laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're right about one thing, Mr. Reed. This was never just about poker. He walked over to the alien girl's cage. Did you think I wouldn't notice her helping you? That I wouldn't have a backup plan? He pulled out a small device from his pocket. It looked like a remote control, but covered in the same strange purple crystals as the cards. This cage isn't just bars and metal. It's connected to her life force. One wrong move in trying to open it. He pressed a button, and the alien girl collapsed in pain, her light flickering wildly. "Stop!" Tom moved forward, but the guards grabbed his arms. Mr. Black released the button. The alien girl gasped, her glow dim but steady. "Now let's discuss your real purpose here. You can read her light patterns. That makes you valuable, almost as valuable as she is." Tom struggled against the guards. "I don't read anything. She chose to help me. Lie to me again, and she suffers." Mr. Black's finger hovered over the button. "How long have you been able to communicate with their kind? Who taught you?" The alien girl's light pulsed weakly, forming patterns that seemed desperate. Tom looked at her, wishing he really could understand what she was trying to say. "Nobody taught me anything," Tom said. "Let her go. You can keep the money, keep me, whatever you want. Just let her go." Mr. Black studied him for a long moment. "You really can't read the patterns, can you?" He shook his head. "Then you're useless to me. But don't worry, you'll still serve a purpose. An example of what happens to people who try to interfere with my business." He nodded to the guards. One of them pulled out a gun. Tom closed his eyes, thinking of all the choices that had led him here. At least he tried. He waited for the shot. Instead, there was a crash of breaking glass. Everyone looked up at the skylight neither Tom nor Mr. Black had noticed before. A rope dropped through the broken glass, and a figure slid down it fast. "Sorry I'm late," said a woman's voice. Traffic was terrible. Tom recognized her, the cotton candy vendor from the show. But now she wore black clothes and moved like someone who knew how to fight. She threw something that looked like a ball of light. When it hit the ground, it exploded into blinding brightness. The guards shouted and covered their eyes. Tom felt someone grab his arm. The woman pulled him toward the alien girl's cage. "I'm Rose," she said quickly, pulling tools from her pocket. "I've been tracking Black's operation for months. Intergalactic Trafficking Task Force." She worked on the cage's lock while Tom stood guard. "We need to get her out before." "Stop." Mr. Black had recovered. He held up the remote again. "One more move and the cage kills her." Rose froze. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't destroy such a valuable specimen." "Try me." His finger moved toward the button. The alien girl suddenly stood up in her cage. Her glow grew brighter and brighter, filling the room with patterns of light that moved like waves. Mr. Black laughed. "Your light shows can't help you now," he said. But Tom noticed something. The purple crystals on the remote were responding to her light, glowing brighter and brighter. Mr. Black noticed too late. The remote exploded in his hand. He screamed and dropped it. The alien girl's light patterns turned into a focused beam, hitting the lock of her cage. It melted like ice in the sun. "That's impossible," Mr. Black whispered. "The cage blocks her powers." "No," Rose said, smiling. "The cage amplifies them. You just never gave her a reason to use her full strength before." The door of the cage swung open, but as the alien girl tried to step out, alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed everywhere. "Dead man switch," Mr. Black said, holding his burned hand. "If she leaves the cage's area, this whole place goes up." "Still want to play hero, Mr. Reed?" Red warning lights flashed across the room as Rose pulled out a small computer from her pack. Her fingers flew over the keys while Tom stood by the alien girl's cage, ready to block any move Mr. Black might make. "The whole system is rigged," Rose said, reading the data on her screen. "If she moves more than 10 feet from the cage, explosives in the walls will go off. We've got maybe 5 minutes before his backup arrives." The alien girl's glow pulsed with patterns that seemed almost like computer code. Rose's eyes widened as she watched. "That's it. She's not just making pretty lights. She's trying to interface with the system." Tom looked at the alien girl with new understanding. "She's been trying to tell us something all along, hasn't she? Not just making patterns, but actually trying to communicate." "More than that," Rose said, Her species doesn't just control light. They exist partly as light themselves. That's why the cage blocks most of her powers. It's not just holding her body, it's holding part of her consciousness. Mr. Black laughed from where the guards held him. Very good. The cage isn't her prison. It's part of her now. Remove her from it, and the feedback kills everyone. You can't save her. But Tom wasn't listening to Mr. Black anymore. He was watching the alien girl's light patterns reflect off Mary's silver cross, still in his pocket. The patterns weren't random. They were repeating, like a message played over and over. Rose, he said slowly, what if we're thinking about this wrong? We're trying to get her out of the cage. But what if we could get the cage out with her? Rose looked up from her computer. The whole cage. It weighs hundreds of pounds, and it's bolted to the floor. Not the physical cage, Tom said. He pulled out the silver cross. The alien girl's light danced across its surface, creating complex patterns. The energy field, the part that's actually holding her consciousness. Understanding dawned on Rose's face. She typed frantically on her computer. The purple crystals. They're not just for show. They're focusing elements. The cage uses them to maintain the containment field. She looked at the alien girl. If we could transfer the field to something else, something portable. The alien girl's glow brightened. Her light patterns swept across the room, highlighting every purple crystal in sight. The ones from the cards, from Mr. Black's broken remote, from the decorations around the tent. No. Mr. Black tried to break free from the guards. Those crystals are worth a fortune. They're worth nothing compared to a life, Tom said. He held up Mary's cross. Can you do it? Transfer yourself to something smaller. The alien girl placed her hand against the cage bars. Her light touched the cross in Tom's hand. And for a moment, he felt a presence, like a thought made of light, full of gratitude and hope. Rose's fingers blurred over her keyboard. The containment field is shifting. She's actually doing it, moving her energy matrix into the crystals. She looked up at Tom. But we need more power, something to complete the circuit. Tom thought of Vegas, of all its bright lights and empty promises. Then he smiled and pulled out his phone. How about $50,000 worth of casino chips? He dumped the money on the table. The alien girl's light touched each chip, making them glow with stored power. Casino chips were made to be hard to counterfeit, packed with tiny electronics that could hold and transfer data. Perfect, Rose said. Microcapacitors in each chip. They can hold the overflow energy until we get her somewhere safe. The alien girl's physical form began to fade, becoming more light than matter. Her patterns filled the room with a dance of colors as she transferred herself into the new makeshift containment field. The cross glowed brightest of all, becoming the anchor point for her consciousness. It's working. Rose shouted over the alarms. The cage is losing power. But Mr. Black had one last move. He broke free from the distracted guards and lunged for the table. If I can't have her, no one will. His hand reached for the chips, ready to scatter them across the floor. The alien girl's light flared like a supernova. In that bright moment, Tom saw her true form for the first time and understood exactly what he needed to do. Time seemed to slow down as Mr. Black's hand reached for the casino chips. In that frozen moment, Tom saw everything clearly. The patterns of light flowing between the cross and the chips, the way they formed a complete circuit. Just like a poker table, it was all about reading the patterns and knowing when to act. Tom dove across the table, not to stop Mr. Black, but to knock all the chips into a perfect circle around the cross. As they fell, the alien girl's light followed them, turning each chip into a point of brilliant energy. The cross floated in the center, glowing like a miniature sun. Now, Rose, Tom shouted. Rose typed one final command into her computer. The alien girl's physical form disappeared completely from the cage, transforming into pure light that flowed into the makeshift containment field they'd created. The cross spun in the air, surrounded by the orbiting chips that hummed with power. Mr. Black screamed in rage and grabbed for the cross, but the moment his fingers touched it, the alien girl's light surged through him. He flew backward, his body crackling with energy, and crumpled unconscious to the floor. "We need to move," Rose said, already packing her computer. "His backup will be here any second." Tom carefully gathered the glowing chips into his pocket, but left the floating cross in front of him. The light patterns flowing from it formed words now, clearer than ever before. "Thank you, but we're not finished." "What do you mean?" Tom asked. The cross spun faster, its light filling the room with images. Tom and Rose saw a distant planet of crystalline cities where beings of light walked among spires of pure energy. They saw a war fought with weapons that bent light itself and a desperate plan to save the last children of a dying race. "She's not just any refugee," Rose whispered. "She's their princess, one of the last of the royal line." More images flowed around them. Other cages, other shows, other captured light beings held in circuits and crystals across the galaxy. Mr. Black wasn't working alone. He was part of a huge smuggling ring that had spent years hunting down the scattered survivors of her people. "We can help," Tom said. "Rose has connections. We can find the others." The alien girl's light pulsed warmly. The pattern showed one more image, a hidden place on Earth where a small group of her people had found sanctuary years ago. They'd been searching for her, but Mr. Black's cage had hidden her energy signature from them. Suddenly, alarms blared again. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hallway outside. "Time to go," Rose said, pulling out what looked like a regular flashlight. "This will hide her energy signature until we get somewhere safe." She looked at the cross. "Ready?" The light swirled one last time, forming clear words. "My name is Lumi, and I'm ready to go home." Tom led them through the back of the tent as Mr. Black's backup forces burst in through the front. In the confusion, nobody noticed three figures slipping away into the Vegas night. Two humans and a floating cross surrounded by a gentle glow. 3 days later, Tom sat in his regular spot of the diner. The news was full of stories about the mysterious shutdown of an international trafficking ring, with arrests made in 12 countries. Nobody mentioned aliens or beings of light. Some things the world wasn't ready to know. Mary refilled his coffee cup and smiled at her cross, now hanging around his neck. It still glowed faintly sometimes, when the light hit it just right. "Found your luck?" she asked. Tom touched the cross gently. "Something better. Found a purpose." His phone buzzed. A message from Rose. Another energy signature detected, this time in Tokyo. Another chance to help. His gambling days were done, but a different kind of game was just beginning. As he left the diner, Tom looked up at the bright Vegas lights. Somewhere out there, Lumi was reunited with her people, planning how to save the others. The cards had been dealt, and for once, the house hadn't won. Sometimes, when you bet everything on doing the right thing, you got more than you ever dreamed of in return. In his pocket, the last casino chip glowed faintly, storing a message in light that only he could read. "Thank you for teaching me that not all cages are made of metal. Some are made of fear, and love is the key that opens them all."